There comes a moment in the life of every tyrant when power becomes too heavy to carry, a moment when the crown, once a symbol of triumph, becomes a weight of iron pressing against the skull. A moment when the ghosts of the past, forgotten victims, broken promises, abandoned loves, begin to circle like vultures. For Henry VIII, that moment arrived long before his final breath. He had once been the Golden Prince of Europe, tall, athletic, brilliant, admired by kings and feared by enemies. He hunted with grace, jousted with fire, composed music, seduced women, and dominated any room he entered. He was the embodiment of the Renaissance dream, the king England believed would usher in a new age of splendor. But power, when wielded without restraint, has a way of consuming the one who holds it. By the end of his life, Henry VIII was no longer the radiant prince of his youth. He had become something darker, a shadow of himself. A king surrounded not by admirers but by silence and fear, a man whose body decayed as violently as the kingdom he carved apart. This is the story of those final terrifying days, the days when the great king collapsed beneath the weight of his own sins, when his palace became his prison, and when death came not as a release, but as a reckoning. What follows is not merely a record of events, it is a descent, the collapse of the body. Henry's decline did not happen in an instant. It unfolded slowly, brutally, and in full view of the royal court. The wound that never healed years earlier, a catastrophic jousting accident, left Henry unconscious for hours. His horse crushed him and a lance struck with terrible force. From that day forward, the king was never the same. But the worst legacy of that accident was the wound, a deep, gaping ulcer in his left leg, an open crater of flesh that refused to close no matter how much medicine, prayer, or royal pride was poured into it. Doctors tried every remedy they knew. Boiled herbs, heated metal probes, poultices soaked in wine, and incisions that would make a modern surgeon shiver. Nothing worked. The wound festered, rot set in. The leg swelled grotesquely, and the smell, God, the smell, that followed Henry wherever he went. A stench of rot and decay that even the most loyal courtiers could not pretend to ignore. Servants fainted. Bedsheets had to be burned. The king's chamber became a place no one entered willingly. A body at war with itself. The ulcer infected his bloodstream. His weight surged to monstrous proportions, trapping him in his own flesh. Breathing became difficult, walking became agony. Finally, he had to be transported in special mechanical chairs, lifted by servants who trembled at the sight of him. The once mighty king was now a prisoner of his own body, and with the collapse of his body came the collapse of his mind. Part 2. A mind crumbling into darkness. As Henry's physical suffering grew, something far more frightening happened within his mind. Paranoia tightened its grip. He began to suspect everyone. Ministers, servants, friends, even his last wife, Catherine Parr. He saw betrayal in every glance, treason in every delay, death in every shadow. Nights became battles, days became interrogations. He demanded constant surveillance. He accused innocent men of conspiring. He believed assassins walked through the palace walls. He trusted no one, not even God. The ghosts returned. Those who served him at Whitehall whispered of strange noises from the king's chamber at night. Henry cried out in his sleep. Sometimes he argued with unseen figures. Sometimes he pleaded, and sometimes he screamed as though someone stood at the foot of his bed. It was said that he saw his wives again. Catherine of Aragon, a lifetime of loyalty thrown away. Anne Boleyn, executed on charges that still stain the pages of history. Jane Seymour, the one wife he truly loved. Catherine Howard, a child beheaded at 19. Anne of Cleves, humiliated by his cruelty. Catherine Parr, alive but accused in his madness. They did not appear in flesh but in memory, sharp, haunting, unforgiving. The king who had once reshaped England through fear was now the one who trembled. The last week, January 1547, arrived like a silent predator. Henry was slipping away, though no one dared say it aloud. A palace of whispers, doctors spoke in code, terrified of speaking the truth. Chaplains watched with dread. Council members quietly made plans for succession. Meanwhile, Henry's condition worsened sharply. Fever took him. His ulcer grew deeper. Fluid filled his lungs. His heartbeat slowed. His breath rattled like a dying engine. The king could not stand. He could barely lift his head. He stared into corners for long stretches of time, as if tracking something only he could see. Something waiting, something patient, The final night on January 27th, the king lay in a darkened chamber. Only candles lit the room. The air was heavy with the smell of death. A priest approached and asked if Henry wished to confess, for the first and last time in his life. Henry opened his mouth, but no words came. He only stared at a dark corner of the room. Witnesses said the expression on his face was one of profound terror, as though he saw not a ghost but a judgment. Some later claimed he whispered the word, monks, a chilling reference to the monasteries he destroyed, the religious men he cast out, the spiritual world he shattered. Moments later, his breathing failed. The great king was gone. He died not with the roar of a lion, but with the whimper of a frightened man. Part 4, Aftermath, a cursed legacy. Henry's body swelled grotesquely after death. His coffin strained to contain him. And then came the infamous legend. During the funeral, fluids leaked from the coffin onto the church floor. A stray dog wandered in and began to lick the liquid. A priest whispered a line from the Bible. As dogs licked the blood of Ahab, so dogs lick the King of England. True or not, the story spread like wildfire. It became part of Henry's legacy, as inescapable as the blood on his hands. For the England he left behind was forever changed. Thousands dead from religious conflict, monasteries destroyed, churches torn apart, a nation divided, a royal line thrown into chaos. The king who broke a kingdom died, broken in every sense. The king who outlived his own soul. A massively expanded, darker atmospheric ending. When Henry VIII finally closed his eyes for the last time, England exhaled. Not in relief, not in grief, but in a strange, hollow quiet. A quiet that felt as if an age had ended, not with a final blow, but with the slow extinguishing of a flame once too bright for the world to ignore. For decades he had been the sun of the English universe. Everything revolved around him. Lives, marriages, wars, faith itself. But by the time he died, his own orbit had collapsed inward, dragging with it every certainty he once held. What remains of a king who believed he could reshape destiny? What remains of a man who thought himself chosen by God, yet feared the judgment of men? The answer lies not in the battles he won, nor in the laws he passed, but in the shadows he left behind. A kingdom built on contradiction and fire. Henry VIII's reign was a paradox, a tapestry woven with threads of brilliance and terror. He elevated England onto the world stage, yet fractured the very faith that once united it. He modernized government, yet ruled with the temper of a despot. He defended his kingdom fiercely, yet could not defend himself from his own impulses. He was a man capable of warmth, of tears, of charm, of affection, but also a man who could, with chilling calm, sign the death warrant of a friend, a confidant, or a woman he once adored. He was at once a visionary, a tyrant, a scholar, a brute, a king, a frightened child trapped in a giant's body. History rarely gives us figures so immense, so contradictory, so impossible to categorize. And that is why Henry remains unforgettable. The final years a throne surrounded by ghosts. As his age advanced, so did the shadows that clung to him. His body betrayed him, ulcers that refused to heal, fevers that returned like old enemies, a heart that struggled to push blood through veins thickened by indulgence and rage. He ate like a king, yet died like a prisoner inside his own flesh. And around him, the ghosts. Catherine of Aragon, wronged yet dignified. Anne Boleyn, whose eyes once sparkled with ambition, now stared at him only in memory. Jane Seymour, the one wife he idealized, perhaps because she died before he could destroy her. Anne of Cleves, spared by indifference. Catherine Howard, a child sacrificed to his paranoia. Catherine Parr, surviving him out of strategy more than love. His ministers haunted him too. Wolsey, who died in disgrace. More, whose head fell for defying him. Cromwell, executed by the same king he had served with terrifying loyalty. If power isolates, Henry died in the deepest isolation imaginable, surrounded not by enemies, but by the echoes of lives he had unmade. What does history say of a man like Henry VIII? Some rulers fade into footnotes. Henry became a monument, complex, monstrous, magnetic. He changed England in ways even he could not understand. The Church of England rose from his desire for a son. A new aristocracy was built from the ruins of monasteries. Parliament became stronger under a king obsessed with personal power. The Tudor myth hardened, shaping national identity for centuries. But his cultural legacy, that was darker. Henry VIII became the symbol of absolute power. The cautionary tale whispered from century to century, "Beware the ruler who thinks himself divine. Beware the king who believes his desires justify everything. The man beneath the crown strip away the ceremonies, the jewels, the palaces. Strip away the armies marching at his command. Strip away the portraits designed to intimidate. What do we find? A man tormented by insecurity. A man terrified of being forgotten. A man who loved women yet could not trust them. A man who demanded loyalty yet inspired fear. A man who sought greatness yet was consumed by pettiness and obsession. Henry VIII was not a monster born. He was a man transformed. By expectations, by power, by loneliness. By the crushing fear that he would never be enough. And in the end, when that fear devoured him, the death of a king and the birth of a legend. On January 28, 1547, the king who once embodied the force and glory of England died slowly, painfully, quietly. There was no thunder, no cry from heaven, no sign in the sky, just a fading breath, a stillness, a body swollen and lifeless in a bed too large for the man he had become. But history does not measure men by their final moments. It measures them by the impact of their existence. And Henry's impact is immeasurable. He shaped religion, he redefined monarchy, he terrified an entire generation. He carved his will into the bedrock of the nation. The man died, the legend began. The final lesson of Henry VIII. If Henry VIII teaches us anything, it is this: power is a mirror, and the more absolute it becomes, the more clearly it reveals the soul of the one who holds it. Henry's power exposed every flaw he tried to hide. It magnified his passions, his insecurities, his cruelty. He became the king he feared others would see in him, a king swallowed by his darkest impulses. In the end, it was not war, not enemies, not conspirators that destroyed him. It was himself. And so his story echoes through time. Centuries later, the world still whispers his name, Henry the Tyrant. Henry the Reformer, Henry the Monster, Henry the Visionary, Henry the King who loved too fiercely and destroyed too easily. History will forever debate who he truly was. But one truth rises above all others. Henry VIII proved that the greatest danger to a kingdom is the king who believes he cannot be questioned. And so his legacy remains, a warning carved into history itself, a reminder that the crown is not a symbol of perfection, but a burden that can break even the strongest of men.